Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, back in the studio today with another mixing video, but this is a different kind of mixing video. Today I'm going to concentrate on a snare sound on one of my older songs that I'd like to improve on, as well as some cool background vocals that were provided on certain versions of this song by my friend Heath Rogers. There were two versions of this song that have been released, the original mix on the 2011 Moondust CD, and the Bandcamp version does not feature Heath's background vocals. The 2019 remixed and remastered version of Moondust does feature the background vocals, and that's what we're going to be working with today. So let's go over to the mixing console and see what we can do with the song Dust and Snow from the Moondust album and its not so great snare sound and Heath's awesome background vocals. So here I am back at the Soundcraft Sapphire recording console with the song Dust and Snow. I've got that up on the console. There's only 12 channels here, and then there are 5 down here. 4 of these are 2 stereo pairs of background vocals, so pair of channels for stereo left and right. I mean, I do have stereo channels on here, but I'm using those in this case for some effects returns. This is the reverb return, which is the Yamaha Rev 500 reverb. And then this is for the UniVibe, which is the Reamper and UniVibe, and I'm running that on an aux send, and then bringing that back to a mult on the patch bay, taking 2 copies of it, plugging those 2 copies into both sides of this stereo channel right here, using the width control. And I've done that in a few videos already, but I just really love this trick. I need to get away from that. But I've been really into the UniVibe Reamper thing lately, and so that's what this channel here is. So reverb, UniVibe, which is a little noisy, so I kind of push that up during the mix, but it sounds great on background vocals. You can hear the swoosh of the UniVibe there when I pull this fader up. So I'm just going to kind of ride that through the mix on those background vocals, and it sounds really cool. I really love the UniVibe, and it's really not noisy enough to be noticeable during a full mix, but you know, during a quiet section or the introduction of the song or something, we don't want that noisiness swooshing around. So my strange channel layout, some of you may be saying, I have instruments here and vocals way down here. Well, I do that for a reason. You know, that's my personal preference. I like my instruments down here, and I almost always lay things out in the same way. So it's easy for me to get to where a certain instrument is on the console easily because I'm almost always laying those out the same way. In some of my older videos, I would actually label the console, and I stopped doing that because, well, I ran out of blue painter's tape and I haven't gotten any more. But also, you know, on the Sapphire, I don't really want to stick tape on here all the time because the strip keeps trying to come up, and, you know, other small challenges like that. But I lay my stuff out the same way most of the time, so that in my head, I always know that my kick drum's going to be on 1, snare on 2. Sometimes it's hi-hat, then toms, then overheads. And, you know, lately I've been basically stemming the toms. And a stem is, of course, a group of things in the computer or in the DAW that you're sending out to a stereo pair. So I've been doing that with toms, and the same with, if I have a hi-hat mic, I'll combine it with the overheads on a pair of channels like I've done in this video. Then if there's a room mic, I'll have it next, then bass guitar. This is what I've done for years and years because it keeps me organized. And I mean, you'll have your own ways to do this kind of thing, but this is just how I do it. So bass, and then guitars. Then if there's any keyboards, those would be next, and then vocals on the higher channels. And in this case, the way I have this console wired is with 8 of the tape returns or computer returns, since they're coming from the DAW, are down here, and the rest of them are here, roughly. So that I have this section or this section of the console to use for subgroups or buses if I need to use, you know, these XFX controls to do some parallel compression or anything like that. I have 2 banks of 8 on either side of the master section for grouping things and parallel compression. And then I know most of my instruments are down here, and my vocals and sometimes feature instruments, I'll put those down here. It just helps me keep those things organized in my head so that I can work faster without having to stick tape all over the console. I generally am going to know where things are because of the way I've set this up. I'm going to play this song from the beginning. The drums don't come in for a while, but I want you to hear it's just a pretty simple mix. It's recorded pretty well. Really, when I recorded this song, everything was recorded well except for the drums, which I'll get to in a little while. But this is the acoustic guitar, bass, and electric guitar. Now I had 2 mics on the acoustic, and most of the time that would be one in front of the guitar and one over the shoulder, because I like the way that sounds in stereo on an acoustic guitar. It's kind of lush and wide, and for a song like this, where this acoustic is holding down most of the song, that's a great technique. Then I have an electric guitar, and that was 2 microphones, one close to the amp and one probably 3-4 feet away from the amp. And the one that's distant is panned slightly to the left. So we're doing some tricks here, to make this sound good, but these are very organic tricks. This is everything from the way that I mic'd it when I recorded it to the way that it's panned in the mix now. So let me play back the beginning of this song to illustrate what I'm talking about. You'll hear the acoustic guitar, the bass, and this electric guitar, and then the vocals come in on top of that.
Left home for the first time, had nowhere to go. Left home for the second time, in the blinding snow. Feels like rain is gonna fall. And it seems like dust and snow follows everywhere I go. Left home for the last time.
Those guitars and bass sound pretty good together, but while that was playing back, I decided to add a little bit of low mids to the acoustic to fill it out a little bit. This acoustic was an old 1970s Yamaha FG-160E, which I always joked that FG stood for fake Gibson. But it was a great guitar. The binding was broken, it was messed up around the edges and stuff, but it was cool. Dreadnought size guitar, and it had a pickup with the controls mounted onto the top of the guitar. And it was really beat up, but it was a great guitar, and that's what this acoustic track you're hearing is, that old guitar. The electric guitar is a Gibson L6S, and I don't remember the pickup setting, but it had the original electronics with the 6-way switch, and I was probably just looking for a good tone, and that would have been played through a 71 Fender Twin reverb. Now I'm going to get to the area where this song starts to cause trouble, and that's where the drums come in. Now, originally there was some really weird phasiness on some of the cymbals and the snare, especially during the little intro. It has a little building up roll, and I just could never deal with that for some reason. I finally got it right on the remastered version, but I did that by sliding some things around in the DAW and lining up tracks. And I can't remember now whether, this would have been done with an XY pair of overheads over the kit, kind of behind and over the kit. So I really don't remember where the phase problems came from, but I do remember solving it by lining up the waveforms in the DAW, which that's kind of nice. It's weird because all the classic records we know and love, they couldn't line things up like that by looking at the waveform on a screen, but in this case it kind of saved the day because I was able to line it up. It could have been the room mic, which is right here. I don't really remember, but that's still corrected in this version of the mix, even though I'm not using any internal processing as far as, compressors or EQs in the box. Everything's on the console. So let's see this part where the drums come in and see if I've resolved the issues that I had with the sound of the snare drum in this analog version of the mix.
Where I go. This world and this time.
You see what I mean? I don't like the snare sound. I've boosted some low mids. I've even boosted some lows with the low shelf. This high mid control is in the center, so I'm not boosting any high mids there. This is just weird. I never could get this snare to sound that good, and normally the snare that I was using in this case is a really good sounding snare. It's an old Rogers Power Tone, and I believe that's been here on the channel in some of my earlier videos, but I'm not sure. I do still have that snare drum, and that's what this was. But for whatever reason, it just really doesn't have the greatest sound. I'm sure that was my fault when I was recording it back then. So I'm doing my best to kind of get a decent sound, and this is of course an original snare track. I'm not adding any samples or anything to this, but maybe I should, because you know, no matter what I seem to do, I can't get this snare to sound that great. I'm going to try some adjustments on the compressor, which in this case is the Symmetrix 501, and see if I can help this snare sound a little bit.
Where I go. This world and this time. This world just running down.
Okay, I don't want to necessarily solo the snare drum because I want it to sound right in the mix, but I am going to bypass the compressor. I've got a switch up here on the Sapphire that I can turn off the compressor. So let's turn off the 501 on the snare and see what kind of sound that gets us.
Where I go. This world and this time. This world just running down. This world and this time. This world won't let me down.
Taking the compressor off of the snare kind of helped the sound. Sounded better without it. And then I started tweaking the EQ and ended up with a high mid boost at 7K and cutting a little low mids instead of boosting it. That was with the compressor off. I'm starting to think maybe the 501 is the wrong compressor for the snare sound on this song. Or I'm going to have to sample replace it. But I got it sounding pretty good on the remaster version. Sounds pretty good. So I should be able to do that or do better here with the analog gear. I think I'll patch in a different compressor. Okay, I've patched in the other channel of the LA Audio 4x4. I'm using the left side of that for the kick drum. And instead of the 501, now I have the snare going to the right side of the LA Audio 4x4. I'm hoping I can sculpt the attack and release better with the LA Audio to get the sound that I want. You know, a lot of times when I want to beef up a snare drum sound, I'll go for a faster attack and a faster release, so that as the compressor lets go, you hear more of the tone of the snare drum. But in this particular case, when I do that, at least with the 501 that I was using before, I get too much of the snare buzz and rattle, and it sounds kind of papery and not great. So, got to find the right balance with the EQ and compression to get this snare to sound like I want it to.
Where I go. This world and this time.
It would help if I turn the insert back on, though.
Where I go. This world and this time. This world just running down.
mute these vocals because they're interfering with hearing the snare drum properly. So let me mute those and try that again. The LA Audio 4x4 already sounds better on this snare sound than what I was getting with the 501. Normally I love the 501 on snare, but it's not working on this particular snare sound. So let's try the LA Audio. Dial it in a little bit, see if that works. But it got rid of these vocals over here. We don't need to hear that. I'm trying to hear the instruments in relation to the snare drum right this second. So no, I'm not soloing it, but I'm muting the stuff that was distracting me, namely those vocals down there. See, the LA Audio 4x4, man, that thing sounds beautiful. That snare drum, I'll dial that in. I showed the specifics of all the settings on the outboard gear at the end of the video, and I do have a multi-camera setup during the actual mix. When I print the final mix, I showed the rack gear in a, picture-in-picture window thingy, so you can see what all the compressors and everything are doing. But yeah, I don't have a second camera set up, so you couldn't see me tweak that in real time. I need to fix that in future videos and find a way to do that too. I need another camera, I guess. Now I'm going to put these vocals back in and see what we get with the snare drum and everything in the mix.
Where I go, this world, in this time, this world is running down. This world, in this time, this world won't let me down. Left down for the first time. Didn't know where to go.
So I'm finally reasonably happy with the snare drum sound. Although, the snare sound itself originally was not recorded as well as it could be. So there's only so much I can do without adding a sample. And I'm not going to do that for the purposes of this video. It's not really important. I'm not gonna bother with that. This does sound better now. So, and move on and see what other interesting stuff I can talk about in this mix besides just the stupid snare that was giving me so much trouble. So since I've already adjusted the camera and everything so you can see down here, I figured I'd play these vocals. We've got background vocals here on these 4 channels and then the lead vocal down here. The lead vocal is being compressed with the RNC compressor, and this set of background vocals, which is Heath Rogers performed on this, these are going through the Art TCS compressor, and I have that linked in stereo using one of the optical compression settings on that. This one is a harmony vocal that only punctuates a couple of songs in 2 places in the song, and it's pulled back in the mix. A lot of these things were actually tracked with compression originally. I think the acoustic guitar and possibly some of the drum kit, like the toms, they might have been tracked originally with compression because I used to do that more. But when I used to have more gear, then I lost all that gear, and then I've gradually gotten more gear, obviously. Think I have too much gear? I'll have to think about that. But let's hear these vocals now.
Where I go, this world in this time, this world is running down. In this world, in this time, this world won't let me down.
So that's what I'm going to throw through this UniVibe here in a second. That is going to be really cool to put UniVibe on those. In fact, let's go ahead and hear that little backing vocal section with the UniVibe. I've already got the ADT plugin by Vacuum Sound on both of these sets. That's in fact the main reason why they're on stereo pairs, or 2 channels in stereo. So I have that ADT effect and they're hard panned. So that's really kind of a cool effect. I'm going to add the UniVibe to that to add a little phasiness to it and see what happens.
Where I go, this world, in this time, this world is running down. This world, in this time, this world won't let me down.
That's pretty cool. I love the UniVibe trick on vocals. Like I said before, I'm going to have to stop doing that because it's going to get old. But it's subtle. You put this in the background, you can blend it in, and it's just really cool. Especially on these. They sound really cool. I got to play that again. Let's hear the UniVibe thingy. Let's hear the UniVibe Reamper setup on the vocals.
Follows everywhere I go. This world, in this time, this world is running down. This world, in this time, this world won't let me down.
That's super fun. So I'm ready to put this mix down, I think, for the purposes of this video anyway. So hang out with me while I do that, and of course I'll describe some of the outboard gear and other things about what I was doing after this part.
Left home for the first time, had nowhere to go. Left home for the second time, in the blinding snow. Feels like rain is gonna fall. Seems like dust and snow follows everywhere I go. Left home for the last time, won't be coming back again. Left home in winter time, dreams like dust and snow. Feels like rain is gonna fall. And it seems like dust and snow follows everywhere I go. This world, in this time, this world is running down.
So I'm working with camera adjustments so you can see the screen on the Yamaha Rev 500. I started with the Wood Room preset and I tweaked the pre-delay up to 10 milliseconds to keep the initial onset of the reverb out of the way of the sources that I'm sending to this. And I lengthened the reverb time to 0.8 seconds. The Yuri LA10 was on the bass guitar, and the attack is 1 mark to the left of center, the release 1 mark to the right of center, detector circuit a little less than 1 mark toward the peak side over here, ratios a little less than 3:1. But during the mix you can see I was getting a lot of compression on the bass because that bass has so much low end. The 501, sadly we didn't use that, ended up switching that out for the right side of the LA Audio 4x4. So the left side of the 4x4 is the kick drum, the right side is the snare drum. That's a setup that I use a lot. The setting here on the kick drum got about a 2 millisecond attack, 0.5 second release. And the snare drum, I just adjust these things to taste. And in this case, this compressor, even before I adjusted it, it sounded better on that particular snare sound than this one did. And I think that's because this is a FET compressor and it has a faster attack. So I have a pretty fast attack. 1 millisecond is what it shows here. And a pretty fast release too, which when I tried that with this compressor, it didn't work right, but on this one it did. Ratio's 3:1. The ARC TCS twin compressor system, I have that linked in stereo and I have it set to the choir preset on the V3 voicing knob, so it's an optical compressor. I do have the tube circuit engaged, and basically the controls are all straight up. Ratios 3:1, attack and release right in the center. The threshold is 1 mark to the left. I just did that to ear, and that's all those stereo background vocals are running through this. The lead vocal I had going through the RNC in super nice mode with a fairly quick attack and release, and just to the left of 6:1 ratio. And you could tell it was pulling back some of the louder parts and just barely compressing some of the other during that mix, so that worked out pretty well. Well, I had a lot of fun mixing that song today and seeing if I can improve on the snare sound that I got on the 2 versions of this that I'd mixed in the past. So I did find that the LA Audio 4x4 did an excellent job on the snare, a lot better than what the 501 was doing before I switched the compressor. Now the 501 is a great compressor and normally I love what it does to a snare drum, but in this case the LA Audio 4x4 did a much better job. I was really happy with the way that this came out for this video, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hope that you'll check out the links in the video description to the original mix and the 2019 remixed version of this song, as well as the other links in the video description. All of that is music, production work that I've been a part of, so you can check all those links out. Those things do go to help support this channel. Hope that you also like this video and subscribe to the Twin Creek Audio YouTube channel. And as usual, I hope that you all have an excellent day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having. Have a good one, and thanks so much for watching.